Welcome back. This is the Resistance Revolutionary Party. I've been looking forward to doing this video for some time now. People may find it humorous, but it is based in fact. I will be talking about the mental deficiencies of the Republican Party and its base. Granted, not everyone who suffers from these conditions are Republican, but a large number of them are. But before I get directly into Republican mental deficiencies, here are some of the talking points Republicans like to manipulate to low-informed, blind following, and ignorant voters. Power. For Republicans, it is about limiting the power and control of the government over the people. Republicans fear that control over health care choices is just the beginning of control over citizens' lives. To that I say that is total and utter nonsense. First of all, Republicans are not concerned about government controlling citizens' lives. They're concerned about government regulating businesses run by the rich and wealthy, or the so-called job creators. That's why they only criticize the federal government and not the state, city, or local governments. The Republicans have very little control over the federal government if they're not in control of all three branches. They share power with the Democratic Party, but along with their rich and wealthy associates, they can wheel and deal and enforce a lot of control over state, city, and local governments through the coercion of the financial backing they receive from their wealthy contributors. They can manipulate and deceive voters with a constant barrage of misleading television and radio ads paid for by the Koch brothers, use TV outlets that disguise themselves as fair and balanced news, which is actually a propaganda network, Fox News, and rely on a block group of radical right-wing voters, aka the Tea Party, as they claim to care about America, but yet they're willing to shut down the government, not pay our debt and ruin the full faith and credit of the United States, try to block the ability or make it difficult, if not impossible, for many Americans to vote, and put an end to workers' rights to negotiate for better wages, safe working conditions, health care, and etc. By doing so, the Republicans hope to maintain and monopolize their power indefinitely by controlling all three branches of the U.S. government, while the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. So if you believe that the Republicans are looking out for the interests, as they like to say, the American people, or that the wealthy is concerned about creating jobs for said people, then you truly need your head examined. Most people, if not all, are in business for one reason and one reason only, and that is to make money for themselves and their investors. Corporations do not create jobs, small businesses do. Corporations are not concerned about the country, let alone the American people, only their profits. If there were a way to run a business without hiring people, they would not hesitate to fire each and every employee. In their narrow-minded thinking way, the less salaries to pay out, the more profits will come in. Here are two examples of how Republicans look out for the interests of the country and the American people. Example number one. The Republicans claim that they are concerned about the debt and the deficit because the federal government spends more money than it takes in, and they do not wish to leave a 20, 30, or $50 trillion bill for their children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren to pay for. That is something that their descendants will not have to worry about, because if Republicans get their way, they will put it into the FDA, the EP, and the EPA. That will leave their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren with a world that has dirty water to drink, contaminated food to eat, polluted air to breathe, and a 200-degree environment to live in, but denying global warming. If that wasn't enough, plus the ability for violent criminals and the mentally disturbed to get their hands on an array of the most deadly weapons that man can conjure up to do with what they please. Example number two. Republicans claim that they are concerned that the federal government is too big and getting bigger, and it needs to be reeled in. But they have no problem in wanting to make abortion illegal, even when the mother's life is in danger from incest or through rape. They want the government to tell women what they can do with their bodies and force them to have ultrasounds against their wishes. That's not big government, and nothing is. They insist on supporting the death penalty, knowing that since the 1990s there have been numerous people found innocent through DNA who were on death row, and no telling how many people were wrongfully put to death. I myself believe in the death penalty, but not by the standards that we choose to enforce it. It is too subjective. There needs to be a stricter guideline for the death penalty, such as not only overwhelming evidence, but more than one witness, plus a confession. They're willing to spend billions of dollars to keep young people incarcerated in prisons, rather than spend millions of dollars to see that young people who are willing to study and work hard receive a good education. Ideology. So-called Republicans are center conservative, so-called Democrats are center liberals. They disagree with each other. But the conservative ideology is that the government should have less control over its citizens' lives. They also strongly believe a person's success and advancement is attributed solely to the dedication and hard work. In other words, if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. That is why it is very difficult for Republicans to pay more taxes for health insurance for someone who has a bad work ethic or who wants to overeat, smoke, or choose not to be healthy. And the BS continues. That is nonsense. The only citizens that the Republicans are concerned about are themselves and their selfish, greedy, heartless bastards who keep them in office, aka the wealthy, and not to mention the idiots, aka the Tea Party, who continue to vote them in. These comments are not directed at all Republicans, big business owners, or all conservative voters. Just certain ones, and they do know who they are. It is almost difficult to try and have an intelligent rebuttal out of the ideology case above that I said previously. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. Not because they have any sort of point, it's just that how do you argue against nonsense? At any rate, here it goes. Somehow the Republicans, people who run corporations, and the Tea Party all fail to recognize how they achieved their success in the first place. As President Obama tried to explain in his speech, which has now been famously termed, "You didn't build that," let me first start out by trying to explain to the nitwits about the meaning of intelligence. Intelligence has a couple of meanings, and I'm going to attempt to explain to the dunderheads one example of intelligence, which is the ability to comprehend. What Obama meant was that you did not build your business alone, you do not run it alone, and it will not succeed with you alone. It took many hard-working and dedicated people to achieve a successful business, starting with the people at the bottom end of the ladder, which included the owner of the company in the beginning. A successful business is like a building block. It can only succeed with a strong foundation. Once that foundation topples, the business is over. Though the people at the bottom rung will not necessarily share in the profits of a business, it is they who are the primary reasons a business succeeds or fails, along with the consumer. That is what President Obama meant by when he said, "You didn't build that." When someone takes a person's words out of context negatively, distort their meaning, they show not only their lack of intelligence, but their ignorance as well. There are many people who try to game the system and live off the backs and hard works of others. That doesn't just include people who don't want to provide for themselves, but instead live off their family, friends, or the government, but also people who own businesses, who aren't willing to pay their fair share of taxes in a country that provided them the opportunity to succeed in. They accept government subsidies and tax breaks that they neither need nor the country can afford, just because they can. In other words, live off the backs of taxpayers and then criticize others for doing the same thing. Hypocrisy comes in all bank accounts. No matter what the size of your bank account is, a leech is a leech. And regardless of what the Republicans like to claim, big businesses are not the job creators, they're the vultures taking advantage of a system known as capitalism, waiting to swoop down and prey on the workers or small business owners for profit. All big businesses do not always provide all their employees with a decent living wage, specifically those on the lower end of the ladder. As I said before, the workers are the foundation that holds the success of a business up. These are hard workers, but due to the greedy, selfish, and inconsiderate owners, they aren't even allowed to share in a minuscule part of the profits, unless their measly paychecks are their share. Because of the continued high rising cost of living, these workers usually have 2 or 3 jobs, and in some cases they work more than 80 hours a week just to make ends meet. So if they have a family, it makes it difficult for them to spend any quality time with them. How dare anyone question these people's work ethics or their dedication to their job? That's just more nonsense coming from the slime balls who believe that crap and have the nerve to look down on the working and middle class. Now, here comes the part of this video that I was looking forward to putting together. Now, I would like to talk about Republicans' mental deficiencies, which haven't been written up in any medical or science books, but it should be. In 1954, Senator Joseph McCarthy, a Republican, led a crusade by accusing numerous people who disagreed with him as being communists. His accusations were based on nothing but his own ignorance and arrogance. Herbert Bloch, a cartoonist for the Washington Post, coined the term McCarthyism, which became a synonym for demagoguery. McCarthyism, or demagoguery, defined by Wikipedia, is a political leader in a democracy who appeals to the emotions, fears, prejudices, and ignorance of the less educated citizens in order to gain power and promote political motives. Demagogues usually oppose deliberation and advocate immediate, violent action to address the national crisis. They accuse moderates and thoughtful opponents of weakness. They exploit a fundamental weakness in democracy. Because the people hold ultimate power, nothing stops the people from giving that power to someone who appeals to the lowest common denominator of a large segment of the population. Here's a quote from Edward R. Murrow, and Murrow said of McCarthy, quote, "His primary achievement has been in confusing the public mind as between the internal and the external threats of communism. We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. We must remember always that accusation is not proof and that conviction depends upon the evidence and the due process of law. We will not walk in fear of one another. We will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason. If we dig deep in our history and our doctrine and remember that we are not descended from fearful men, we proclaim ourselves, and as indeed we are, the defenders of freedom wherever it continues to exist in the world, but we cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. The actions of the genius senator from Wisconsin have caused alarm and dismay amongst our allies abroad and given considerable comfort to our enemies. And whose fault is that? Not really his. He didn't create this situation of fear. He merely exploited it, and rather successfully. Sound familiar? Oh, unquote. And my part was saying sounds familiar. But here are some other mental deficiencies such as McCarthyism. Rhamnesia, or what I like to call convenient amnesia. This term was coined by President Barack Obama during the 2012 re-election campaign. It is a memory loss that causes a person to profess a certain belief for years and at any given moment have the opposite belief, totally denying their previously held belief. In other words, they will lie, deny, and repudiate any such original beliefs, regardless of having been on audio or videotape expressing that original belief. And when the time or occasion deems it necessary and is convenient, they will switch back to the original held belief, claiming to have no memory or knowledge of one's most recently held belief. A twist on the old adage, who are you going to believe, your lying ears and eyes or me? Michelle Bachmann syndrome. That is a term that I coined. It is a symptom of a disease which has been around for centuries but had no name until now, and I named it Michelle Bachmann syndrome. It causes a person to make up their own facts with no proof or evidence to support their claim. In other words, they just lie because of their insecurities, stupidity, or jealousy. How do you know someone has Michelle Bachmann syndrome? Present a person with facts backed up with evidence as proof and watch their stupidity continue. It's amazing. Another term I coined, Glenbeckitis. Many conspiracy theorists suffer from this affliction. It is a disease where an individual or a group express an absurd ideological belief, where one takes a bunch of random and extreme thoughts or events, tie them all together to pander toward the weak-minded, aka conspiracy theorist type, so as to give credence to their delusions as if it has some credibility to it. Ultimately, it will lead to inconsistencies and a never-ending stoppage to that conspiracy. Then they will perhaps sneak in an ounce of truth, juxtaposed with a bunch of lies, distortions, and deceit, and then wrap it around their warped, feeble brains to respond to a question which has the answer: the government is out to get you. Oh man. Here's another one I coined: Daryl-Issa disorder. It is a disorder where a person knowingly, willfully, and intentionally misrepresent the facts by taking someone's words out of context to mislead the uneducated listener or public. Another part of the disorder is that a person is unable or incapable of keeping a secret. This next mental imbalance is, I named it as well. It's called Typhoid Trump. Now, if anyone remembers Typhoid Mary, she was someone who carried a disease that, surprisingly enough, did not affect her, but it affected people around her. She would fix their meals, and because she was not prone to being, her hygiene was not in the best of conditions, and there were people who were killed. I mean, that died from eating food that she served. So she carried this disease, but it didn't kill her. Much like Typhoid Trump. Once again, like I said, it's a term that I coined. It is a mental imbalance that is contagious. It causes a person to have an over-excessive amount of arrogance, selfishness, jealousy, greed, insecurity, stupidity, hate within their very being. One of the worst cases found, and whom the name derived from, was Donald Trump. People with this mental imbalance are prone to possess McCarthyism, Romnesia, Michelle Bachmann syndrome, Glenbeckitis, and the Daryl-Issa disorder. The only known cure for this mental imbalance is the total commitment and acknowledging and accepting truth, facts, and reality. Without this cure, the individual who possesses this mental imbalance will live the rest of their lives in pathetic obscurity and in total stupidity. The existence for all of these mental deficiencies, which are purely self-inflicted, is done out of selfishness, greed, jealousy, insecurity, stupidity, and hate. To argue an irrational point so that an individual can take facts and blow it out of proportion by inserting misleading, deceptive, and inaccurate information to try and deceive the listener or public's lack of knowledge on a particular subject, so as to justify one's distorted lies. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, because I enjoyed doing it. But be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and leave your comments at the bottom. Remember, making a difference starts with you. You're either the cause or the solution to a problem. And we will be back for another video coming up soon. Thank you.